Week 5 of Dana White's Contender Series is here. I'm going to give you a prediction breakdown of all 5 fights on this card. Last week we did pretty well. We went 3-2. We went 3-2 in the first couple weeks. Went like 0-4 in the third week, and then this past week went 3-2. So we've done pretty well in predictions so far on Dana White's Contender Series. Hopefully I can do a little bit better here than 3-2. Hoping actually not to get, hopefully we at least get a win here. Well, I mean, the base level is 0 picks right, so let's not do that again. But this is actually a very interesting card. I feel like a lot of fights can go either way on this one, but starting off, I think I might take an underdog here. I don't know the actual odds yet, but from the way I see people picking this fight, they are going with Rainn Guerrero. I'm actually going with Dione Barbosa, and I just think she's actually very talented. Well, I guess I'll just say her achievements here: a black belt in jiu-jitsu, brown belt in judo. I believe she was on the Olympic team in Brazil for jiu-jitsu like a few years back. So she's very talented in grappling as a whole. But Barbosa, I mean, the way she gets takedowns on some of these chicks are actually insane for a women's MMA fighter. A lot of her takedowns she initiates in the clinch. She'll go to the clinch and then she'll kind of either like do a toss or throw to get them down. She has a couple inside trips, like against Jessica Middleton. She actually looked very impressive. She kind of just showed everything she kind of had takedown wise. Inside trip, I think she did a couple hip tosses, and there's this takedown that she did have. I don't even know what it's called. I think Volkanovski did this to Makhachev in like the third round, accidentally or on purpose. But what she did was she pressured, and Middleton was like standing sideways a little bit. So she threw a couple punches. She put her lead leg under her and like threw her down. I don't know the actual terminology for it. Maybe someone could tell me, but it was actually a pretty impressive thing to do. I don't see many fighters doing it. I don't see many, or at least at all, any women's MMA fighters doing it. So I thought Dione Barbosa looked pretty impressive there. You don't really see that much from women's MMA fighters, but Rainn Guerrero is going to be better on the feet. Dione Barbosa is going to be taking this on short notice, so we'll see what happens there. But Rainn Guerrero will be better on the feet. I think she does initiate a lot in the clinches, which I think will probably be a problem for Rainn Guerrero here, because a lot of the times when she gets in the clinch, she's looking for takedowns, and now maybe she won't be looking for a takedown, so it'll be a little bit different here. But I just think if she does face trouble, she'll probably initiate the clinch, and it'll just be easier for Barbosa. If Rainn Guerrero wants to win this fight, it probably isn't going to be in the wrestling and grappling. I'm going to be completely honest here, because I think Barbosa beats her in any of those areas. I think there's a lot of openings for Rainn Guerrero on the ground to where Barbosa can take effect, like maybe grab it back, or at least just get some points on the ground there on top of her. So I'm going to go with Dione Barbosa, possibly by submission in the second or third round, if not a decision. I just think Barbosa has looked really impressive, getting takedowns and controlling these chicks on the grounds. And what I've known from these Dana White's Contender Series fights, and it seems like with the men, you'll kind of have to, because these fights are so weird and you don't really know fight IQ wise and skill for skill, because these guys face different levels of competition. What you kind of have to go off is, for men, it's more of who has finishing potential, because a lot of guys, especially this year in Dana White's Contender Series, have the wrestling and grappling advantage, but they just don't use it early on, and these guys are just hurting them very early and finishing them off. So that's their problem. But for the women, I've noticed that if they do have a grappling advantage, they normally get to it immediately and they take advantage of it. It seems like for these women's MMA fights, if you do your research on it, you pretty much get it right, like most of the time. And now her being an underdog is kind of worrisome, but I am going to take her here. I do think she has the grappling advantage. I think she can force herself on Rainn Guerrero. Maybe she gets a submission, just like a very quick submission, but I can see this one also going to a decision. So I'm not, the confidence on this one isn't super high, because I do think this is going to be a very close matchup. I can see Rainn Guerrero winning this one, possibly finishing her on the feet. But Tapology, 70% Guerrero, 86% by decision, 30% for Barbosa, 80% by decision within that. I am going with Barbosa probably by decision. I don't know. I'm probably 50-50 on decision and submission in this one. I think if it is going to be a submission, it'll probably be in the second or third round. If it's a decision, it'll probably be like a 29-28. I can see Rainn Guerrero maybe doing well a little bit on the feet, and then Barbosa just controlling and not doing much on the ground. So I'm going with Barbosa in this one by decision. Up the card, we have Gene Silva versus Kevin Vallejos. I am going to go with Kevin Vallejos in this one. This is a very interesting matchup, though. Gene Silva has never won a decision. He's only lost a decision, lost by unanimous decision, lost to a split decision. And he's only won the majority of his fights in the first round. He's only won twice in the second round. So he hasn't really gone out of the first round much. I think the only time he's gone past the first round was a loss against Gabriel Schlupp in 2018. Almost butchered that name, but he hasn't fought in 5 years past the first round, if that says anything. And I think he has a very scrappy style, especially the guys that he has been fighting. Shahin Nazjafari, 9-9 opponent, 4-0 opponent, 5-2 opponent, 5-2 opponent. So not many guys with too much experience. 7-2 opponent, that's a little bit better. Beat him at 3.5 years ago. But Kevin Vallejos, 14-2 opponent, won that one by KO. 21 years old as well, so super young. But 6-4 opponents, 17-9 opponents, 7-14. So not the best opponents either. But I think if this fight does get scrappy, I can rely on Kevin Vallejos to be a little bit more durable as this fight goes on, and I can see him in the second round, maybe late first round, him catching Gene Silva after Silva tires out, because I think Silva's just going to go out there swinging, or at least Kevin Vallejos is going to try and get him swinging to initiate the scrap. I think Silva's just going to tire out. It seems, especially in the first rounds of his most recent fights, that he does tire out a little bit as well, or at least you can see hints of him possibly having some problems with the conditioning or the cardio. I won't say conditioning because it's a little bit different, but with the cardio to where he's going to be able to keep up the pace, because he does have a lot of power in his hands and he does swing pretty heavy. So maybe if he keeps this one a little bit more relaxed, he can take it to Kevin Vallejos a little bit longer in this matchup. But Vallejos, I think, has a decent wrestling, grappling, does at least have good scrambles as well. So maybe he can mix in some of the takedowns in this one with some of his striking. I think he'll just be a little bit too much for Silva as this fight goes on. So I am going to go with the second round TKO for Vallejos in this one. Maybe late first round, but 91% of Tapology is picking him in this one. 80% by TKO KO. 9% is picking Silva. Within that, 73% of that by KO. So they're saying KO either way. I can see this getting really scrappy. Up the card, we have Chad Hanekom versus Dylan Budka. And now this is another interesting matchup here. Chad Hanekom, South African dude, very tall, 6'4". So, and this one's going to be at middleweight. So we'll see how that weight cut looks. But 9-2. His last fight was a very impressive win over Injala. 11-1 opponent. Knocked him out brutally with a lead elbow and just put him out cold stiff. Had his arms hanging out in the air. You might have actually seen it on I'm sure on social media somewhere when it did happen. But Dylan Budka, last fight was a win over Dan Stevenson by rear naked choke. Before then, lost to Azmat Bakoyev by split decision there, 15-3. So he does fight quite a bit. I mean, he's had 2 fights within the last month and 3 weeks. So to get super specific, but in the last 2 months he's had 2 fights and is about to have 3. So he's a very active dude, 23 years of age, still very young. Similar reach here, but Chad Hanekom, he does push quite a bit of a pace, and I think the problem for Dylan Budka here is that he is taking this on short notice, and I don't know, especially with how much he throws in his hands, the amount of power and the way his style is in the wrestling department. I think it might be a very big problem here if he is getting pushed into a pace that Hanekom likes to push here with the wrestling and grappling. And I think if he sets it up with his hands as well, works the whole body there, mixes it in, keeps Dylan Budka guessing on this one, I think Chad Hanekom could get a good win here, possibly by a finish in the second round after he tires out Dylan Budka. But I don't know. Dylan Budka taking this one to short notice, he does have a very solid chance because Chad Hanekom is hittable at certain moments. But I think his frame of winning is going to be very early on in this matchup. So I am going to go with Hanekom by finish, by TKO KO, probably just ground and pound strikes, 89% picked for Hanekom here, 62% of that by TKO KO, 11% for Budka, 50-50 on submission, and TKO basically, what is that? Oh, sorry, 50-50 on decision and TKO basically. So I'm going to go with Hanekom in this one. I just don't like that Dylan Budka is taking this one on super short notice, but he's had won some fights on short notice as well. So maybe he does look good in there, and maybe he just ends up catching Chad Hanekom. But I think Hanekom has a good chin, and I think he'll do well in this one. Up the card, we have Sidey versus Ramon Taveras. And now this is a super interesting matchup because I am going to take Ramon Taveras in this one. And honestly, I think Ramon Taveras is going to be better on the feet here. I know he hasn't fought some of the best guys compared to Sidey, but let's be real, Sidey hasn't fought some of the best guys either. I guess his only loss was to Matteo Vogel, who did fight on Dana White's Contender Series last week, who did lose to Kwambe, even though it was somewhat of a controversial decision there. But Sidey, fought Ali Wazook 6-2, and fought him twice. Fought him when he was 4-1, fought him when he was 6-2, and then beat up 15-13 opponent, 3-0 opponent, 2-0 opponent. So he hasn't fought some of the best guys either. And I just think from what I've seen from Taveras in his fights, he has the better striking in my opinion. I think he has more pop in his shots, a little bit more power. The technique is a little bit more cleaner in my opinion. Sidey, although does look very good from like just watching him, he throws in a lot of combinations. I just think he's a little bit sloppier. Like his shots aren't being turned over much. It seems like he is missing quite a bit on his punches when he does throw them. And I think Taveras does a really good job at countering and can step out of the way. And I can just see Sidey overcommitting on a punch and just getting countered, hurt very badly, and then Taveras just finishing him off there. But the thing is, in this one, is Sidey does have a grappling advantage, but I just don't think he will use it. And that's the case with some of these Dana White Contender Series fights, is that you have guys with distinct advantages in the grappling, but sometimes they just don't use it. Now, it's kind of a weird thing to rely on in this prediction because Ramon Taveras, I'm expecting to possibly be like a plus 250, plus 260, 70, whatever underdog on this one. But I just can see Sidey being the kind of guy that is very confident in his striking because his striking doesn't look bad. I'm going to be completely honest, but compared to Taveras, or I hope I'm saying that right, Taveras, yeah. I think he's just crisper. I think it's just cleaner. I think he'll connect with strikes a little bit more often. I think he has more power in his hands compared to Sidey, who does have a little bit more output, is going to be a little bit more sloppier, and it takes a while for him to get that finish against a guy that I think will finish him on the feet. And I think it's going to be too late for Sidey to rely on the wrestling and grappling in this one. And we haven't really seen too much of Ramon Taveras defend the takedowns as much, and we haven't, like, I'm going to be completely honest, Edward Massey, I cannot find that fight at all. I looked up Combat Night Pro. I think I've only seen, or Combat Night Pro 21. I've only seen one fight from that card ever uploaded. So I haven't been able to see this fight when he did lose. He did lose relatively quickly about 2 years and 3 months ago against Edward Massey by KO. But I don't know. I think Taveras is good in this one. I think he'll be better on the feet, better popping his shots. And now I could just be completely wrong here and he just gets steamrolled. But I just don't see Sidey relying on that wrestling grappling in this one. I think he's going to be very confident on the feet. I can just see him getting caught, and it's just going to be too late for him to end up grappling here. So I'm going to go with Taveras here by finish in the first round. I can just see it going like 1 or 2 minutes into the first. Maybe Sidey goes for an early takedown and Taveras defends it relatively early. And then Taveras just ends up catching him after Sidey just has a little bit too much output, and he just catches him overextending a little bit, and Taveras cracks him. So I am going to go with Taveras' first round finish here. 10% picked by Tapology, 49% of that within that 10% by KO, 90% Sidey picked for this one, 69% by KO. We'll see what happens. Again, Taveras hasn't fought the best competition compared to Sidey, but Sidey hasn't really fought the best competition. But we've just seen a little bit more from him compared to a Taveras, because we have seen him in more decision fights, and he has looked a little bit more impressive against some of those little bit better opponents. And the guys Taveras is fighting is like wiping their feet on the canvas, like celebrating, but also getting their ass kicked. So it's just weird. But I am going to take Taveras in this one. I think he's just going to be a little bit better on the feet. Up the card, we have Bruno Lopes versus Brendson Ribeiro. I am going to take Bruno Lopes in this one. He's looked super impressive in LFA. Beat Willie Anderson Paiva by KO. Beat Mountain Azevedo by submission. Beat Lucas Rosa by KO. And then beat Flavio Magone by submission. And he looked very impressive in that Willie Anderson Paiva matchup. I'm just going to butcher all these names. All right. He looked very impressive there. Worked his entire body. Good leg kicks. Good jab to the body, and was like mixing it up on him, and you can tell that Paiva was just super confused that whole entire fight, and it's just he couldn't hang in there with Bruno Lopes at all. And Brendson Ribeiro in his fight against Paulo Fagundes got dropped very early on, ended up getting a takedown later on and finishing him up on the ground there. But Bruno Lopes, I don't think he's going to get taken down by Ribeiro. I think he's a very stocky dude. They're going to be a similar height. I don't necessarily know the reach in this one, but Bruno Lopes does have some very good power in his hands. Again, works his entire body. He's going to be mixing it up on Ribeiro in this one. I can just see Ribeiro getting caught, shooting too late for a takedown, it getting defended relatively easily, and then Bruno Lopes just finishing him up, maybe to body shots, tires him out, and then eventually Ribeiro will end up fading a little bit more, and Bruno Lopes finishes him up by TKO against like the fence. Probably in the late part of the first round, that's what I have it in this one. 96% for Lopes, 78% by KO, 4% for Ribeiro, 67% of that by TKO KO. So I am going to go with Bruno Lopes. He's a very durable guy, in my opinion. He took a lot of shots from Paiva in that one, some really good shots. That is kind of a problem for Lopes, is that he's not as defensive when he is unloading some of his combos there, but I think he'll be fine in this one. I think he does super well. I am going to take Bruno Lopes by first round finish. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know who you guys have on this card, and I'll see you guys next time.